Shabbat Shalom, Shalom Shalom, Barak Yahuwah. Shabbat Shalom to the 12 tribes of Yashar'AL. Shabbat Shalom to the diaspora, the dispersion scattered across the four corners. Shabbat Shalom to the older brother, the stick of Yehuda. And Shalom Shalom to the younger brother, the stick of Ephraim. And Shabbat Shalom to all of the strangers and the foreigners who sojourn in our midst, who have come out from among the nations and have been grafted into the household of Yashar'AL through the precious blood of Yahushua HaMashiach. And Shalom Shalom to you all, beloved ones. Because it is written, whether you're native born or stranger, it is written that there is one Torah, both for the native born and for the stranger, who sojourn in your midst. And so that means that there is one good news, there is one truth, there is one way, there is one life. To the native born and stranger, whoever would accept this truth. So that I say, Shalom Shalom, welcome back, beloved ones, Shabbat Shalom. It's the Master's set apart day of rest that He has given us and have commanded us to rest on the seventh day. And it's a beautiful day, another beautiful day and opportunity to rest in the Master. Welcome to Walking the Ancient Path. This is the Master's channel, this is his channel. My name is Moshe ben Yahuwah, that is to say Moses, the son of Yahuwah, in the English tongue. Welcome back, beloved ones. Welcome back, whether you're if you are a new person coming by, and welcome back if you stay watching the videos. You know, welcome, shalom, peace and blessings to you all. Barak Yahuwah for another day, to another Shabbat day to rest in Him, and another day to learn of His ways. And I just pray that as we go through this study that He has prepared through His servant, that He would be in our midst and give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to understand. B'Sham Yahusha. Without further ado, as always, beloved one, there is a word that the Father has prepared through His servant. And if you watched last video, the last teaching, this will be a continuance of a series of teachings that will come forth concerning the good news and the everlasting covenant. All right, so this will be part 2, the good news and the everlasting covenant, part 2. What is the everlasting covenant? Continuance. This is a continuance of what is the everlasting covenant. All right, because last teaching the Master was teaching us, you know, what a covenant is, how a covenant is established with Him, and what is the eternal covenant. The Master brought us back to the beginning and gave us the understanding that this covenant that was really truthfully established in eternity, it began on earth with Adam. It was introduced on earth with Adam, and we learned how the covenant was established with Adam. It was established with Adam, the first man, the firstborn son of Yahuwah. And we learned, obviously, if you know of the story of Adam and Kuah, how Adam and Kuah broke this eternal covenant, and how there was now a need for a renewal through the shedding of blood. Alright, and that goes back to what the Master revealed to us as far as how a covenant is established or renewed, and that is through a death, through the shedding of blood. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. In other words, there is no renewal. Because if the covenant is not renewed, you are not forgiven. They go hand in hand. The renewal of the covenant and the forgiveness of your sins go hand in hand. All right, and we've seen how the Master covered the sins of Adam and Kuah through the shedding of blood, and He covered their nakedness through the skins of the coat of the animal, and thus He renewed the eternal covenant with them. All right, and He gave them the animals to continue to serve as a temporary substitute throughout their generations. Okay, Not that the blood of bulls and goats could bring salvation, but they were a shadow of the one who would come to bring salvation. And these animals simply served as a temporary substitute, a temporary substitute for us, so that we would not die and be consumed in his wrath, because the day Adam and Kuah sinned, Yahuwah had every right to consume them. But out of his loving commitment towards them, his compassion, his favor towards them, he extended favor and gave them these animals to then take their place so that he would not destroy them. And this practice continued throughout their generations until salvation came. And we're going to get to that. But we're continuing to understand how this eternal covenant, which began in eternity, it started in eternity because it is Yahuwah. But it was introduced to man on earth when man was created. Man was created to be a son of Elohim, created in his image, created to walk in covenant with him. And we seen that man failed. Man failed to keep this covenant. And so because Adam failed to keep this covenant, there is now a need for a renewal, a renewed covenant. And we're going to learn, what we're going to continue now is how this covenant was passed down from generation to generation, firstborn son to firstborn son, and how it was renewed throughout the generations. See, the renewed covenant, the renewal of the covenant is not a new concept. It did not start with the Mashiach. See, the renewal of the covenant began in the garden and continued throughout the generations of the scriptures, if you will, of his people. His people, the covenant can only be renewed with his people. And we're gonna see that how this covenant was renewed with his people, with his son, throughout the generations until it got to our master and our savior Yahushua HaMashiach. But we just need to understand that this is one eternal covenant. Because if you come from the Christian church, as was pointed out in the previous teaching, if you come from the Christian church, you will know and understand, or have the understanding, that there is two covenants. You know, that when the Mashiach came, he established a new way. That is a lie from the pit of hell. You must understand, we all must understand, that there is one eternal covenant, one everlasting covenant. And it is this covenant that was passed down throughout the generations with his people and renewed with Yashar'AL once and for all. And so Yashar'AL, according to scripture, as we're going to read, this is covenant people. His one true covenant people who bear this everlasting covenant. We bear this everlasting good news. Okay? I'm getting ahead of myself because we're gonna allow scripture to prove this. If you already do not know, if you know this, then Barak Yahuwah. But if not, and you are coming into the truth and learning about this, I pray that this video, that by the end of the series of these teachings, you will know and understand there is one everlasting covenant, there is one everlasting good news. Okay? But nevertheless, we're continuing from last teaching, how this covenant was renewed throughout the generations. The same covenant that was established with Adam, that he broke, but was renewed through the shedding of blood, is now going to be continued. This same renewal is we're going to see being played out throughout the generations of his people, if you will. And so, without further ado, we're going to go, and this is why we're going to go into what most people know as the apocryphal scriptures, which should not really be known as that, but that's how it's known. They're known as apocryphal scriptures, even though they are simply just scripture. We're gonna be reading out of the book of Jubilees, because the book of Jubilees is one of the most revealing books that help the understanding behind the truth of the everlasting covenant. It is not in addition to anything, but it's simply a deeper revelation of what the traditional 66 does not show. Does it make sense? It simply gives more revelation concerning what the 66 does not. The 66 mentions of it, but it goes into greater detail, and it helps us in our understanding concerning this truth. And so I highly recommend, if you do not believe in these books, to take it to the master so that he can reveal to you the truth of his word, and that these in fact are scriptures, so that you can use this in your study and help your understanding concerning the truth of the master. Okay? But nevertheless, we're going to be reading out of the book of Jubilees. A lot of these precepts will be out of the book of Jubilees for the sake of helping it for us to have our understanding to be increased. All right? But nevertheless, Jubilees chapter 6, verses 1 through 16. All right, let me see. I need to pull out the scriptures. So we're going to read the book of Jubilees. And we're going to read chapter 6. And we're going to read verses 1 through 16. The book of Jubilees, chapter 6, verses 1 through 16. You know what? We're going to read 1 through 19. Okay? We're going to read 1 through 19, and give me one moment, y'all. My apologies. I should have had these ready. Just trying to make sure that everything is right before I continue in the reading. Okay. We're going to read 1 through 19. My bad, beloved ones. Jubilee 6, 1 through 19. Starting at verse 1. Okay? And on the new month of the 3rd month, he went forth from the ark and built an altar on that mountain. So if you understand the context, this is right after the flood. This is in accordance with the book of Genesis talks about, but we're going to read in a greater detail. This is right after the flood, and Noah is coming off the ark. Okay? Verse 2. And he made atonement for the earth, and took a kid and made atonement by its blood for all the guilt of the earth. For everything that had been on it had been destroyed, save those that were in the ark with Noah. So here, again, now, we see atonement. And we're going to see what this atonement was for. We see the shedding of blood. We see a death. We see atonement for the earth, for the crimes and the guilt of the earth, because the earth had become corrupt. And so this is why the master sent forth the flood to destroy the earth for its crime, for its sins. And so we see Noah, a Kahan in the order of Melchizedek, make an atonement for the earth through the shedding of blood through a death. And we're going to see what happens. And he placed, verse 3, and he placed the fat thereof on the altar, and took an ox and a goat and a sheep and kids and salt and a turtle dove and the young of a dove, and placed an ascending smoke sacrifice on the altar, and poured thereon an offering mingled with oil, and sprinkled wine and strewed frankincense over everything, and caused a goodly Savior to arise before Yahuwah. It was an offering. And Yahuwah smelled the goodly Savior, and he cut a covenant with him. All right, so we see a death happen, the shedding of blood, same thing in the garden, and we see a covenant being established, but not just any covenant. This is more accurately a renewal of the everlasting covenant. Let us continue. He cut a covenant with him, that there should not be any more of flood to destroy the earth, that all the days of the earth, seed time and harvest, should never cease, cold and heat, and summer and winter. and day and night shall not change their order, nor cease forever. And you, he's speaking to Noah, you increase ye and multiply on the earth, and become many on it, and be a blessing upon it. And the fear of you and the dread of you I will inspire in everything that is on the earth and in the sea. All right. If you remember in last teaching, I told y'all to remember. When the master spoke to Adam, what was the very first command he gave man? Be fruitful and increase. All right. Why? Because when he created man, he established an eternal covenant with man, and we know that a covenant consists of obedience to the covenant. He gave him a command to be fruitful and to multiply. So do you think it's a coincidence that he is telling Noah the same words that he spoke to Adam? No, it is not a coincidence, and it was not simply for the repopulation of the earth. Obviously, they needed to repopulate the earth, but it was not just that, because he spoke the same words to Adam. Why? Because these were the words of the covenant that he established with Adam. And so here we see the same words that he spoke to Adam being spoken to Noah, because this is the everlasting covenant being renewed. And now he's laying forth the words of the covenant to Noah. Be fruitful and increase. Verse 6. And behold, I have given unto you all beasts and all winged things, and everything that moves on the earth, and fish in the waters, and all things for food. As the green herbs, I have given you all things to eat. But flesh with the life thereof, with the blood, you shall not eat. For the life of all flesh is in the blood, lest your blood of your lives be required. At the hand of every man and at the hand of every beast I will require the blood of man. Whoso sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of Elohim he made man. And you increase ye and multiply on the earth. Again, he's laying forth the words of the covenant that was established with Adam and now is being renewed with Noah. And Noah and his sons swore that they would not eat any blood that was in any flesh. And he cut a covenant before Yahuwah Elohim forever throughout the generations of the earth in this month. This is a covenant that is forever. Okay? Because this covenant that is speaking about that is forever is the eternal covenant. Remember, Olam means forever, without end, does not cease. It is forever. This covenant is the same covenant. Verse 11. On this account he spoke to you that you shall cut a covenant with the children of Yashar'AL in this month upon the mountain with an oath. If you remember, Exodus 19 is when that oath was spoken. The master spoke concerning this covenant, the words of the covenant, the 10 Dabarim, and the people agreed, all that Yahuwah has spoken, we shall do. And so here, this is what the book of Jubilees is referring to. Because it's if you understand, the book of Jubilees is a messenger, the messenger of the president speaking to Masha on the mountain, on Mount Sinai. And so right now, this is why this is being brought up. But nevertheless, it's speaking about the covenant that was given at Sinai. The covenant that was given at Sinai is the same covenant that is being renewed right here with Noah as we are reading. This is why the messenger brought back the account of the renewal of the covenant at Mount Sinai with Yashar'AL, which we read in Exodus 19, and you will also read in Exodus 24. When the people agreed, all that Yahuwah has spoken we shall do. This is the oath that they entered. Let us continue. And that you should sprinkle the blood upon them because of all the words of the covenant which Yahuwah made with them forever. All right, we're gonna get to that, what it's talking about. That's referring to Exodus 24. But nevertheless, all right, Yahuwah is establishing a covenant, but more specifically renewing the eternal covenant with his son Noah. All right, and this testimony is written concerning you that you should observe it continually, that you shall not eat any day any blood of beasts or birds or cattle during all the days of the earth. And the man who eats the blood of beast or of cattle or of birds during all the days of the earth, he and his seed shall be rooted out of the land. And do you command the children of Yashar'AL to eat no blood, so that their names and their seed may be before Yahuwah Eloheinu continually. For this Torah there is no limit of days, for it is forever. They shall observe it throughout their generations, so that they may continue supplicating on your behalf with blood before the altar. And every day at the time of the morning and evening, they shall seek forgiveness on your behalf perpetually before Yahuwah, that they may guard it and not be rooted out. And he gave to Noah and his sons a sign that there shall not again be a flood on the earth. All right, in verse 14, it's speaking about the daily offerings, that every day they would bring the daily offerings for the forgiveness of sins. Why? Because again, as was spoken, the blood of animals was never able to take away sins, but served as a continual daily covering for the sins of the people, so that Yahuwah will not destroy them for their sins, and for the sin for the sin will not be consumed for the sin that was brought in through the transgression of Adam and Kua, so that they will not be consumed. They would bring these animals continually, so that the animals will take their place until salvation would come. But nevertheless, this was all for the renewal of the covenant. The covenant was continually renewed through the shedding of blood. 15. And he gave to Noah and his sons a sign that there should not again be a flood on the earth. And he set his bow in the cloud for a sign of the eternal covenant, that there shall not again be a flood on the earth to destroy it all the days of the earth. For this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the feast of Shabuot in this month, once a year, to renew the covenant every year. All right, so we see the renewal of the covenant is not a New Testament thing. It is not a thing that began with the Mashiach. The renewal of the covenant was a yearly thing at the feast of Shabuot. If you understand, this is why we celebrate the feast of Shabuot. It is all about the renewal of the covenant. And the book of Jubilees, throughout the book of Jubilees, we see the covenant being renewed with his sons on the feast of Shabuot. And if you understand, this is what is taking place. All right, but we're not here to talk about Shabuot, but that's just to bring out more context. What we're reading, the feast of Shabuot, which happens in the middle of the third month, more specifically the 14th of the third month of Yahuwah's calendar every year. This is the day that the covenant is renewed year by year, as we just read. This is what it's all about, the renewal of the covenant. And this is what we're talking about, the good news and the everlasting covenant, the renewed covenant. Okay? But nevertheless, 18. And this whole feast was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation to the days of Noah. 26 Jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 Jubilees and 1 week of years till the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death, his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood. But Abraham observed it, and Issac and Jacob and his children observed it, up to your days, and in your days, and the children of Yashar'AL forgot it until ye celebrated anew on this month. Again, it's speaking about the feast of Shabuot. This teaching is not about the feast of Shabuot, but Shabuot has everything to do with the renewal of the everlasting covenant, the very thing we're talking about. All right, but we're simply reading this because Noah kept the feast of Shabuot. Abraham, as we're going to read, Issac, Jacob, they were obedient to the Torah. And because they were obedient to the Torah and they guarded the master's ways, the covenant was renewed with them. It was renewed with them. All right. It was renewed with Abraham, Issac, and Jacob. And then it was renewed with Yashar'AL as a whole. And we're going to read that. Okay. But the reason it was renewed with them is we're going to see The same thing, the same reason why it was renewed with every one of them was because they were obedient to the words of the covenant. They were righteous men. Noah was a righteous man. Abraham was a righteous man. Issac, Jacob was a righteous man. And because they were righteous and perfect in their generations, the Master chose them to bear this everlasting covenant and to renew it with them. And this is what we're going to see. Because all of these men, they had the same Ruach dwelling in them. But again, Jubilees 15, 1 through 19. Jubilees 15, 1 through 19. We're going to continue to see this covenant being passed down. We just seen this covenant. It was renewed with Noah because he was obedient. He obeyed Yahuwah perfectly. And because he obeyed Yahuwah perfectly, the Master chose him as a firstborn son to bear this covenant, to bear the eternal covenant, and it was renewed with him. And we see the same way it was renewed with Adam is the same way it was renewed with Noah, through the shedding of blood, through a death. And we're going to see the same thing with our righteous father, Abraham, because that is the thing they all had in common. They were righteous men. They were obedient to the words of the covenant. And so the Master chose them to renew the covenant with them. Is it making sense? Let's continue. Jubilees 15, 1 through 19. And if you wanted to, my bad, but Jubilees 6, what we just read, you can precept it to Genesis 9. All right, I just had a note right there. You can precept it to Genesis 9. Jubilees 6 and Genesis 9 go hand in hand. All right, Jubilees 15 is you can precept it to Genesis 17 in the book of Barashit. But Jubilees 15 verses 1 through 19. Jubilees 15, 1 through 19, starting at verse 1, it says, "And in the 5th year of the 4th week of this Yobel, and in the 3rd month, in the middle of the month," there it goes again, "Abraham celebrated the feast of first fruits of the grain harvest." There it goes again, the feast of Shabu'u. "And he offered new offerings on the altar, the first fruit of the produce to Yahuwah, a heifer and a goat and a sheep on the altar as a burnt offering to Yahuwah. Their grain offerings and their drink offerings he offered on the altar with frankincense. And Yahuwah appeared to Abraham and said to him, I am Yashar'AL. Approve yourself before me and be perfect. And I shall make my covenant between me and you, and I shall multiply you exceedingly. I shall make you to be fruitful." In other words, there it goes again, fruitfulness. Why is he mentioning that he will make him fruitful? Because now this covenant we're reading about here is the same covenant that was renewed with Noah and the same covenant that was renewed with Adam. Because Abraham was a firstborn son. Yes, he was. He told them, approve yourself before me and be perfect. Walk before me and be perfect. All right. And so now he's choosing him to bear this eternal covenant. And he's now going to renew this covenant. Not with just him, but with his seed. "And I shall make my covenant between me and you, and I shall multiply you exceedingly." Abraham fell on his face, and Elohim spoke with him and said, "See, my laws with you, and you shall be the father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name from this time even forever shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of many nations. And I shall make you very great, and I shall make you into nations, and sovereigns shall come forth from you. And I shall establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you throughout the generations for an everlasting covenant." There it goes, the everlasting covenant. We read that in Jubilee 6. The sign of the eternal covenant was the rainbow, was it not? Here we see the mention of an everlasting covenant. Do you think that these are different covenants? See, I remember coming into the truth and people trying to explain this, that there is the Adamic covenant, and there is the Noahic covenant, and there is the Abrahamic covenant, and then there is the, I've heard people try to separate these different covenants because I don't know why. I really can't explain why, but that's what that's the conclusion they come to. There was the Adamic covenant, the Noah covenant, and then there was the Abraham covenant. You know, and it was, I never really understood it, but as the master continued to show me and teach me, he has shown to be true that there is one eternal covenant. There is not different ways. He is one. His ways are one. His Torah is one. And it has been the same from the beginning. All right, he changes not. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so this covenant that we're reading about, this everlasting covenant that we're reading about here in Jubilees 15 is the same one we read about in Jubilees 6, when he established an eternal covenant with Noah. He is simply renewing the covenant with his sons. Why? Because they were righteous. They were righteous. They were perfect in their generation. They walked in his image. All right, do you understand? When Adam was created, he was created to walk in his image. And we see Noah, we see Abraham, and we see all of the righteous sons continuing in this very principle, walking in his image, walking in his righteousness. And because they walked in his image, he chose them to bear the everlasting covenant, and he renewed it with them because they walked as firstborn sons. One thing about firstborn sons is that they are the ones, a firstborn son is the one that looks closest to the father. He walks like his father, talks like his father, bears the characteristics of his father. The firstborn son is to reflect the father in every way. He is the closest related, the closest in image to his father. He is the beginning of his father's strength. All right. And this is the same principle that all of our righteous forefathers walked in. They walked they walked in the image of Yahuwah because they were his sons. But nevertheless, so that I may be to you an Elohim and to your seed after you. Let me start at verse 9. And I shall establish my covenant between me and you. Remember, covenant is an agreement between multiple parties. Those multiple parties here is Yahuwah and Abraham and his seed. I shall establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant. What does everlasting mean? Forever, without end, does it not? So that I may be to you that I may be an Elohim to you and to your seed after you. And to you I give to give to you the land where you have been a sojourner, the land of Canaan, that you may possess it forever. And I shall be their Elohim. He is making a promise. And Yahuwah said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant. You shall guard your end of the covenant. I'm going to keep my covenant, my end of the covenant, and be your Elohim. And not only that, I'm going to bless you with an inheritance, but you also have to keep your end of the covenant. You must keep your end of the covenant by obeying the words of the covenant. You and your seed after you, and circumcise every male among you, and circumcise your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of an everlasting covenant between me and you. And the child on the 8th day you shall circumcise. Every male throughout your generations, he that is born in the house, in whom you bought with silver from any stranger whom you have acquired, who is not of your seed. He that is born in your house shall surely be circumcised, and those whom you have bought with silver shall be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. For an everlasting law, rather. And the uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin on the 8th day, that being shall be cut off from his people, for he has broken my covenant. He has transgressed the words of my covenant. Okay? And Elohim said to Abraham, as for Sarai your wife, her name shall no longer be called Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I shall barak her and give you a son by her. And I shall barak him and shall become a nation, and sovereigns of nations shall proceed from him. And Abraham fell on his face and rejoiced, and said to his heart, Shall a son be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bring forth? And Abraham said to Elohim, O let Ishmael live before you. And Elohim said, Yes, but Sarah shall also bear you a son, and you shall call his name, you shall call his name Issac, and I shall establish my covenant with him, an everlasting covenant, and for his seed after him. Okay? So, what just took place is that a covenant has just been renewed. The everlasting covenant has been renewed with Abraham. All right? And he is promising him that not only this covenant will be established with you, but with the son that I will give you. And I will establish my covenant with him. And that's what we're going to read. That's what we're going to read next concerning Issac. The same covenant that was established with Noah is now being renewed with Abraham. And he gave him the circumcision as a sign of the everlasting covenant. We've seen the rainbow as a sign of the eternal covenant. The circumcision is a sign of the everlasting covenant. We know that the Shabbat day is also another sign of the everlasting covenant. These are all signs which join and affix us into covenant with the Master, if you understand. The circumcision, this is why we still circumcise our 8-day-old sons. Alright, because we desire to obey the words of the covenant. He has given us this as an instruction, and so we as his people must keep our end of the covenant. And if we obey from the right place, the Master will keep his end of the covenant by bringing forth the promises and the inheritance that he has given to us as his covenant people. Does it make sense? All right, all we need to do is keep our end of the covenant. This is what it's all about, to covenant with our Elohim, to walk in obedience to the covenant of our Elohim. And this is why he chose Abraham, because Abraham obeyed every word that came forth from the Master. He obeyed every word that came forth from his mouth. And because he was perfect. And so because he was perfect, because he was obedient, he chose Abraham to renew the covenant with him and his seed forever. All right? So now Abraham was the beginning of a nation. We must understand. Abraham was the beginning of the nation that Yahuwah chose to be his covenant people. But this covenant that was renewed with Abraham did not begin with him. Does it make sense? This covenant that we're reading about goes back to Adam, as we read in Genesis. All right, and it was simply renewed from firstborn son to firstborn son to firstborn son until it got to Abraham and his seed. And this is what we just read. Okay? So, this is what it's all about. Obedience. As Abraham walked in obedience to the covenant, we also must continue in this same walk if we desire for this covenant to be renewed in us. All right? I'm getting ahead of myself because we're going to talk about how is the covenant renewed in us. You know, how is it renewed? And we're going to allow the Master to break that down in future teachings concerning the everlasting covenant. But Abraham, Issac, and Yashar'AL were all righteous men in whom Yahuwah chose to renew this covenant with. We're going to go to Jubilees chapter 24, 8 through 12. We're continuing the renewal of the everlasting covenant. The renewal of the eternal covenant is not a new thing. It did not begin with the Mashiach. It started in the garden and continued throughout the generations with his firstborn son. All right, Jubilees 24, verses 8 through 12. Jubilees 24, verses 8 through 12, starting at verse 8, it says, And the scarcity of food was over the land, and Issac departed to go down into Mitzrayim in the 2nd year of this week, and went to the sovereign of the Pelishites, to Gerar, to Abimelech. And Yahuwah appeared to him, and said to him, Do not go down into Mitzrayim. Dwell in the land that I tell you, and sojourn in this land. and I shall be with you and barak you. For to you and to your seed I give all this land, and I shall establish my oath which I swore unto Abraham your father, and I shall multiply your seed as the stars of the heavens, and give unto your seed all this land. There it goes once again. Fruitfulness, 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 fruitfulness. Be fruitful and multiply. He's promising, I will make you fruitful and multiply. Because the reason why is because this is the same expectation, the same covenant rather. This is the same covenant that began with Adam. He told Adam, be fruitful and multiply. He told Noah, be fruitful and multiply. He told Abraham, I will make you fruitful. He's telling Issac, I will make you fruitful. Because these are the words of the covenant. It is the everlasting covenant that he is now renewing with Issac, his son. Why? Because he was a righteous man. Because he was a firstborn son of Yahuwah. 11. And in your seed shall all the nations of the earth be Baruch. Wait, my bad. Abraham, stars of the heavens. Yeah, 11. And in your seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Shall be blessed. And we're going to talk more about that. But this is the purpose. The reason why he's choosing this nation is for a greater purpose. It's for an even greater. He didn't just choose Yashar'AL to be his set apart nation, and that's it. He chose them for an even greater purpose, in which we will discuss. But remember that in your seed shall all the nations of the earth be Baruch. And we're going to see why, okay? Because your father obeyed my voice. Why? Because your father obeyed my voice and kept my charge and my commands and my Torah and my laws and my covenant. This is why he chose Abraham. Because Abraham was a righteous man who obeyed the voice of Yahuwah, who obeyed the words of the covenant. And because he obeyed the words of the covenant was renewed with him. It is now being renewed with his son Issac. And now obey my voice and dwell in this land. And he dwelt in Gerar 3 weeks of years. And so now he's telling him, now you walk in the same likeness in which your father walked. And because he was righteous, because he was perfect before me, I renewed the covenant with him. And if you do so, if you do likewise, I will do the same with you. I will covenant with you now, my son Issac. I will covenant with you. Okay? Now we're going to Yaakov. We're going to Yaakov. We're actually going to go back to 19. Go back to Jubilees 19. Well, not that we were in 19, but we're going to backtrack to chapter 19. Jubilees 19, 11 through 23. The book of Jubilees, chapter 19, verses 11 through 23. You know, and I know we could really, I really recommend that y'all read the book of Jubilees, because obviously there's a lot more in it that is edifying. But obviously we would be these teachings would go on forever if we did that. So that's why we're kind of just skipping from we're skipping throughout the timeline, if you will, of these righteous men. But there's a lot to look into concerning their walks, concerning their obedience, and why Yahuwah chose them. And so that's why I recommend y'all go to read this book to see why Yahuwah chose them. Because it was beyond that they simply kept the commandments, but that was part of it. They were perfect. They were perfect firstborn sons. Okay? Not Jacob. We're going to read about Jacob now. But Jubilees 19, 11 through 23. The book of Jubilees, chapter 19, verse 11 through 23. Starting at verse 11, it says, And Abraham took a third wife, and her name was Keturah, from among the daughters of his household servants, for Hagar had died before Sarah. And she bore him 6 sons. Zimram, Yokshan, Medan and Midian, and Yishbak and Shua in the 2 weeks of years. And in the 6th week, in the 2nd year, Ribkah bore to Issac 2 sons, Jacob and Esau, or Ashu. And Jacob was smooth-skinned and an upright man. Upright man. And but Esau was fierce, a man of the field, and hairy, and Jacob dwelt in tents. And the youth grew, and Jacob learned to write, but Esau did not learn, for he was a man of the field and a hunter. And he learned battle, and all his deeds were mighty. And Abraham loved Jacob, but Issac loved Esau. Alright, Abraham loved Jacob. We're gonna see why. Abraham saw the deeds of Esau, and he knew that in Jacob his seed, his name and seed should be called. And he called Ribkah and gave command regarding Jacob, for he knew that she loved Jacob more than Esau. And he said to her, My daughter, watch over my son Jacob, for he shall be in my place on the earth, and for a barakah in the midst of the children of men, for the esteem of the whole seed of Shem. For I know that Yahuwah shall choose him to be a people for a possession unto himself, above all peoples that are on the face of the earth. And see, Issac my son loves Esau more than Jacob, but I see that you truly love Jacob. And still further, to your kindness to him, let your eyes be upon him in love, for he shall be a blessing to us on the earth from this time to all generations of the earth. Alright? Remember, Jacob shall be a blessing to all the earth, to the barakah in the midst of the children of men. Alright, Jacob. If you are Yashar'AL, you are Jacob. And so what is said about us, we will be a blessing in the midst of the children of men. And we will be a blessing on the earth from this time to all generations of the earth. We're going to see why. Because this is what the good news is all about. Okay? And let your hands, 21, let your hands be strong, and let your heart rejoice in your son Jacob. For I have loved him far beyond all my sons, and he shall be Baruch forever, and his seed shall fill the whole earth. And if man could number the sand of the earth, his seed shall also be numbered. And also the blessing with which Yahuwah has blessed my seed and I shall belong to Jacob and his seed always. Let's continue to read a little bit because I actually overlooked some parts. So, and 24. And in his seed shall my name be Baruch, the name of my fathers, Sham, Noach, Kanuk, and Mahalalel, and Enush, and Shath, and Adam. And these shall serve to lay the foundations of the heavens, and to strengthen the earth, and to renew all the luminaries which are in the expanse. And he shall be called Yaakov before the eyes of Ribkah his mother, and he called Yaakov before the eyes of Ribkah his mother, and kissed him, and blessed him, and said, okay, yeah, we got to continue reading. My bad, beloved ones. I actually overlooked some of these things when I was putting, the master through me was putting the lesson, but I overlooked something. So we're going to continue to read because all this stuff is very revealing, okay? So we're on 26. Well, now we're going into 27. Yaakov, my beloved son. So now Abraham is speaking to Yaakov, his son. Yaakov, my beloved son, whom my being loves. May Elohim barak you, bless you from above the expanse, and may he give you all the blessings with which he blessed Adam, and Kanuk, and Noach, and Sham, And all the words which he told me, and all the matters which he promised to give me, may he cause to cling to you and to your seed forever, according to the days of the heavens, above the earth. We're going to stop right there. May he give you the blessing which he blessed Adam, Enoch, Noah, Shem, and all the words he told me, and all the matters which he promised to give to me, may he cause to cling to you and to your seed forever, according to the days of the heavens above the earth. All right? You can't make this up, beloved ones. All right? The same blessing, the same covenant, it's the same thing. The blessing, the firstborn blessing, the barakah, the inheritance, is the covenant. It all coincides with the covenant. The covenant which was established with Adam is the blessing. All right? The blessing which was given to Adam, the covenant, was renewed with Noah, was renewed with Shem, was renewed with Abraham, and that was renewed with Issac, and is now going to be renewed with Yaakov forever. All right? The blessing, the barakah, the firstborn blessing, is the covenant. And within the blessing, within the covenant, there is an inheritance. There is a promise given to his firstborn son. All right? Why do you think it's mentioning all of our righteous forefathers? He mentioned Mahalalel, Enosh, Seth, Kanuk, Shem. All these were righteous men. These were the righteous sons of Elohim who came from Adam. They were sons of Seth. Seth who came as a substitute for Abel, who was slain by his brother Cain. All right? These were all firstborn sons, and the blessings that was given to them, the covenant that was given to them. I know we didn't read about them, but just understand, it began with Adam, and it was passed down from generation to generation until it got to Abraham. And then it was renewed with Issac. And then it was renewed with Yaakov once and for all. And here, Abraham is revealing to Yaakov, his grandson, that this same blessing, this same covenant, which began with Adam, which was given to Adam, is now being given to you, my son. And all the promises, the inheritance, and the firstborn blessing will belong to you, my son. Can you see it? Can you see it? There's no multiple covenants. There is only one everlasting covenant. And the reason why he chose Yaakov and loved him above all his sons, he had many grandsons. He had many grandsons. But out of all the grandchildren, Yaakov stood out. Why? Because of the same reason why the same reason why Yahuwah chose all of his firstborn sons was because he was an upright and perfect man, righteous and perfect in his generations. Yaakov was that firstborn son. All right? And so if you call yourself Yaakov, you claim the name of Yaakov, but you don't walk in this same image, which is perfection, which is righteousness, you are not Yaakov, you are not a firstborn son, and this covenant does not belong to you. It is not yours. All right? We're going to stop right there as far as in Jubilees 19. And please excuse me, beloved ones, as I be reading, I see it just, these precepts are highlighted to me, and I just have to read them because, I guess I probably overlooked them. I try to have the precepts ready before the teaching, but sometimes when I'm reading and I see the additional precepts, and it bears witness to my nafash, I just have to bring them out. But, just please excuse me for having to make a few edits in mid-teaching. So if you wanted to take notes, it's 11 through 27. Jubilees 19, 11 through 27 that we just read. All right, but let us continue. We're going to read Jubilees 32. We're still reading about Yaakov. Jubilees 32 verses 16 through 20. Jubilees 32 verses 16 through 20. Starting at verse 16. And if I'm reading a little too fast, I'm just trying to get through these precepts because there is a handful of precepts. Just pause the video, take notes, write them down, so that this teaching is not prolonged. That's really the reason why I'm kind of just calling out the precepts a couple of times and just going into them immediately so that this teaching is not prolonged. But if I'm going a little too fast calling out the precepts, I'm sorry. I just don't want to make this teaching too long. But nevertheless, Jubilees 32, 16 through 20, starting at verse 16, it says, "And on the following night, on the 22nd day of this month, Yaakov resolved to build that place and to surround the courtyard with a wall and to set it apart and to make it set apart forever, for himself and for his children after him. And Yahuwah appeared to him by night and blessed him and said to him, Your name shall not be called Yaakov, but they shall name your name Yashar'AL. Yashar'AL, Yashar'AL. If you claim to be Yashar'AL, and if many people boast in the fact that they are Yashar'AL, they are Yaakov, but honestly, truthfully, this is Yahuwah appearing to him, speaking that he is Yashar'AL. You see, the name Yashar'AL does not come from the sons of men. The name of Yashar'AL comes from Yahuwah, comes from above. So if you claim to be Yashar'AL, and this same thing is not spoken over you by Yahuwah himself, you are not truly Yashar'AL. To be called Yashar'AL is something that comes from above, not from men. Not from men. It's not earthly. The name Yashar'AL is not earthly. It is it's a heavenly. It's a heavenly name given to us from our heavenly Father. Can you see it? All right, just had to point that out. But Yashar'AL shall be his name. 18. And he said to him, I am Yahuwah who created the heavens and the earth, and I shall increase you and multiply you exceedingly. There it goes again. Fruitfulness, fruitfulness, fruitfulness. And sovereign shall come forth from you, and they shall rightly rule everywhere, wherever the foot of the sons of men has trodden. And I shall give to your seed all the earth which is under the heavens, and they shall rightly rule all the nations according to their desires. And after that they shall gain possession of the whole earth and inherit it forever. Inherit it forever. And he finished speaking with him and went up from him. And Yaakov looked till he ascended into the heavens. Until the heavens. 20. Okay. So here, this is where Yahuwah again is confirming what Abraham spoke to him. The master himself is confirming to him what Abraham told him, that his seed will be a blessing to all the earth. And it is revealed to us the inheritance. All right. See, a covenant is a promise, is it not? Yes, it is. It's a promise. It's an agreement. And so here the master is making an eternal promise to Yaakov and his seed, that his seed will be his son, and he will be their Elohim. And that if Yaakov and his seed follow the ways of the covenant, he promised that I shall give to your seed all the earth which is under the heavens, and they shall rightly rule all the nations according to their desires. And after that they shall gain possession of the whole earth and inherit it forever. Is it not written, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth? Is it not written in the Psalms that the righteous shall inherit the earth? Where is this understanding come from? It comes from Yahuwah himself, because he promised that he will give Yaakov the earth. All right, so we already are beginning to learn part of the inheritance, that part of the inheritance is the inheritance of the earth. Yes, we see a promise of him giving them the land of Canaan, and that's part of the inheritance, because the land of Canaan, in which the land is the land of Yashar'AL, is the best part of the earth. It's the best part of the earth. But that's not where the inheritance stops. See, part of the inheritance is the entire earth. Is the land of Canaan is just the best part. But it doesn't stop there, because we see here the inheritance that he has promised us is the entire earth, provided if you walk in the obedience of the covenant. See, if you guard your end of the covenant, this will be what you will inherit if you walk in obedience to the covenant. All right? And we're going to talk more about the inheritance, but since we literally read it, I could not just pass it by. The earth is part of the inheritance. All right? He has given us a promise. He has given us a promise that he will give the earth to man, to Yaakov. All right? Did not in the beginning, when he created Adam, was not Adam the ruler of the entire earth? Yes, he was. And so the inheritance of the earth is not something new in and of itself. Because when Adam was created, the earth was his possession. But the earth, the possession of the earth, was stripped from him, taken from him through the deception of Hashatan. When Hashatan deceived him and caused him to rebel and to break the covenant, Hashatan then became the Elohim of this earth. And the possession of the earth was taken from Adam. All of his possessions were stripped. And so part of this good news is the restoration of all things. Part of the good news is the inheritance. The inheritance is that the master will restore the inheritance of the earth. He will restore the inheritance of the earth back to the sons of men. And more specifically, he will restore the inheritance of the earth to Yaakov and his seed forever. Forever. This is part of the blessings and promises and inheritance that he has given to Yaakov and his seed. This is something to rejoice in. The same earth that was given to our righteous forefather Adam as an inheritance, which was stripped from him by Hashatan, will be once again restored to us. His son will be once again restored to us, his son, as an inheritance, as an eternal possession forever. All right? So that's something to look forward to. If you call yourself a so-called Torah keeper, understand that part of the inheritance that he has given to Yaakov is the earth. Is the earth. All right? The righteous shall inherit the earth. The meek, the humble shall inherit the earth. And those are all witnesses to what we're reading about here. He's speaking this to Yaakov as a promise, as an inheritance. If you be my people and guard my ways, I will be your Elohim, and I will bless you with an everlasting inheritance. There goes a covenant, a multi-sided agreement, an agreement between multiple parties. In this case, it is with Yahuwah and Yaakov and his seed. An eternal promise and agreement. All right? And so this covenant is now being renewed with Yaakov. He chose Yaakov because Yaakov was a righteous man like his father Issac, and Issac, which was a righteous father, was a righteous man like his father Abraham, and Abraham was a righteous man like his father Sham, and Sham was a righteous man like his father Noach, and Noach was a righteous man like his father Kanuk, and Kanuk was a righteous man like his father Seth, and Seth was a righteous man like his father Adam. All these men were righteous men, perfect in their generations. Yahuwah chose them to not only be his son, but to bear the eternal covenant. Because you can't be a son of Yahuwah and not be in covenant. They go hand in hand. And so all these sons of Yahuwah bore the everlasting covenant. The covenant was renewed with them, established with them, And it continued throughout the generations until it made it to Abraham and his seed. It was renewed with Issac, and it was renewed once and for all with Yaakov and his seed. Yaakov and his seed. All right. And we're not, obviously, we know the story. We know that Yaakov had 12 sons. Through Yaakov came forth the 12 sons, and through the 12 sons came forth the 12 tribes of Yashar'AL. Now, we're obviously not going to go into all of that, but if you are a student of the script, you already know this. Through Yaakov came 12 sons, and through these 12 sons came forth the 12 tribes, which made up the nation of Yashar'AL. All right? And we know this, the story of Yashar'AL. They went down to Egypt. After years of harsh slavery, the master sent forth deliverance in the person of Moshe, and he sent Moshe to redeem them from slavery. And after sending Moshe to redeem them from slavery, he brought them to Mount Sinai, in which again he is going to renew the covenant with Yashar'AL once and for all, this time as a nation as a whole. He is now going to renew the covenant with Yashar'AL as a whole, as a complete whole nation. Okay? And this is going to lead us to our next precept. Exodus 24, the book of Exodus 24, 1 through 8. The book of Exodus 24, verses 1 through 8. Starting at verse 1, it says, And to Moshe he said, Come up to Yahuwah, you and Aharon, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Yashar'AL, and you shall by yourself from a distance. But Moshe shall draw near to Yahuwah by himself, and let them not draw near, nor let the people go up with him. And Moshe came and related to all the people all the words of Yahuwah, and all the right rulings. And all the people answered with one voice and said, All the words which Yahuwah has spoken we shall do. See, so going back to Jubilees 6, it was mentioned that he cut a covenant with them by an oath. Not simply by an oath, but by the shedding of blood, and which we're going to read right now. All right, but this covenant that was read about in Jubilees 6, the eternal covenant, it brings us back here to Jubilees, not Jubilees, Exodus 24. They coincide with one another. They're witnesses to one another. And it just further witness to establish that it is all one eternal covenant. All right, that same covenant that he established with Noah is the same covenant that we are reading about here in Exodus 24. All right, Exodus 24, if you know the context, is immediately after the master spoke the 10 words. He spoke the 10 commandments to Yashar'AL, to the entire nation of Yashar'AL. And so now they are agreeing to the words of the covenant. This is a marriage ketubah taking place, a marriage agreement. This is Yahuwah right now marrying his bride, Yashar'AL, through an oath. All right, this is why when a man and woman get married, there must be the exchanging of vows. There must be an oath between them, because oath and vows are binding. When you swear an oath, this is a binding agreement. And so here the master is binding himself in agreement with his people. And Yashar'AL too are binding themselves in agreement with Yahuwah. Yahuwah is our husband, is our head. Yashar'AL is his bride. And now Yahuwah and Yashar'AL are coming into a marriage covenant as we are reading. Through an oath. And this eternal covenant is being renewed with Yashar'AL, his bride, once and for all. No different than when a man and woman get married. What takes place? A covenant is established. Here is not just any covenant. It's not just any earthly covenant, but it is the eternal covenant that we have been studying about. The same covenant that was renewed with Adam and passed down throughout the generations is now being renewed once and for all with Yashar'AL as a nation. He is renewing this covenant with them, and he is entering into covenant with them as a man enters into covenant with a woman. They enter into covenant with one another. Yahuwah is literally marrying his bride and establishing and renewing the eternal covenant with Yashar'AL once and for all. Verse 4. Moshe wrote down all the words of Yahuwah, and rose up early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 standing columns for the 12 tribes of Yashar'AL. And he sent young men of the children of Yashar'AL, and they offered burnt offerings and slaughtered peace offerings of bulls to Yahuwah. And Moshe took half the blood and put it in basins, and half the blood he sprinkled on the altar. Ooh, so here we see a death. It goes again. Without a death, a covenant cannot be established with Yahuwah. All right, with Yahuwah, when it comes to the Master and establishing a covenant with Him, not just any covenant, but the eternal covenant. The only way to enter into this eternal covenant is through a death. See, they set 12 standing columns to represent the 12 tribes of Yashar'AL. And at the base of the mountain, in the midst of these columns, there was offerings being made. In other words, there was a death. These animals that were being slain were symbolic of Yashar'AL, were symbolic of the nation of Yashar'AL. These animals were now bearing the crimes of Yashar'AL, and their crimes were being covered. And not only that, the blood of these animals is being used as a renewal, to renew the covenant once and for all with Yashar'AL. The blood of these animals is what is sealing this covenant. Alright? And Moshe took half the blood and put it in the basins, and half the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that Yahuwah has spoken we shall do and obey. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, see the blood of the covenant which Yahuwah has made with you concerning all these words. The blood of the covenant. The blood of the everlasting covenant. The blood of the everlasting covenant. This blood that we're reading about is a shadow of the precious blood of our Master, Yahushua HaMashiach. See, if you call yourself a covenant son, a covenant daughter of Yahuwah, and you do not possess the blood, you are not in covenant. Alright? Without the shedding of blood, there is no covenant. There is no renewal. And there is no forgiveness of sins. You can't be in covenant with Yahuwah if your sins are not forgiven. Alright? And so the blood is what covers our sins. The blood is what atones for us. And the blood is what seals us in covenant. It's all about the blood. Without a death, there is no covenant. Without blood, there is no covenant. Alright? And so here the Master is sealing the covenant with his people, Yashar'AL, once and for all. Once and for all. Once and for all. This is an eternal covenant. An everlasting covenant. An everlasting covenant. And so, I think we're going to stop right here for the sake of this teaching not being too long. But there's going to be one more installment, I guess, as far as what is the everlasting covenant, because now we have to, it has to lead us into the Mashiach. See, we can't talk about this eternal covenant without talking about the Mashiach, without talking about his redemptive blood. Because all the offerings that we have read about, starting in the garden, the offerings that were offered after the ark, the offerings that were offered by Abraham, Issac, Jacob, all the blood of these animals, the blood that was just sprinkled on the people, all of these animals, their blood was all a shadow of something greater. And that is the redemptive blood of Yahushua HaMashiach, which was shed to renew the covenant once and for all, forever. Forever, forever. Alright, and this is what we're going to talk about in the next teaching after this. But we're going to stop right here. I think this was a good stopping point. And I think this is a good length to the video for whoever is viewing to chew on, for us to understand that this covenant is one eternal covenant. Alright, the reason I read all these precepts and went throughout the generations and the annals of time was to establish the fact that it is one eternal covenant. The same covenant that started off this teaching in Hebrews and in Isaiah, that it mentions in Isaiah that it has been broken, and because the covenant has been broken, there is a curse. The earth is cursed. It's the same covenant. And so that's the reason we read all these precepts, to establish the fact that this is in one eternal covenant that the Master has established with creation, and that the Master has established with his people, Yashar'AL. And this is what we just read in Exodus 24. The eternal covenant was now just renewed once and for all generations unto eternity. And now later we're going to see the Mashiach bearing this covenant, renewing this covenant by his precious blood. Because that is the good news. That is the good news, beloved ones. The renewal of the everlasting covenant through the shedding of blood, not the blood of bulls and goats, but the blood of our precious Master, Yahushua HaMashiach. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Until the next time, beloved ones, I pray that what was just read was enough to carry us on to the next teaching. There's going to be a part 3, I guess, of this installment of what is the everlasting covenant. And we're going to continue on the good news, understanding the good news, and how does it play, how does the good news, I guess, how does it play, how does the covenant, and how are we involved with this covenant? How can we be involved in the same manner that our righteous forefathers were involved? And we're gonna, I pray by the end of this series of teachings, the Master will teach us and help us to understand what we must do. Okay? But nevertheless, I think that's it for right now. Until the next time, beloved ones, I pray nothing but the blessings, the favor of our Master, Yahuwah, that it will rest upon you all in your household. Until next time, beloved ones, I love you all very much. Shalom, shalom. Yahuwah.